Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of the Laughing Place Movie Club. Got some friends with me again today. Most of our normal crew, except we are without Jeremiah. We've got Kyle and that way over here, and we're going to talk about X-Men: Dark Phoenix. No, just kidding. We are actually finally talking about the MCU as Ant-Man and the Wasp is now available on Disney Plus. It's been a while since I watched this one, and obviously just refreshed myself on it today. What do you guys think of this one? Kyle, let's start with you.
Oh, I thought this movie was really fun. The first Ant-Man was one of the few MCU films that we didn't see in theaters, and when we did eventually watch it, we kind of wondered why we didn't see it in theaters because we loved it so much. So I was really looking forward to the second one, and I thought it delivered. I think I'd be hard pressed to choose which one I like better, but I thought this one was a lot of fun, and also obviously had some big implications. More than meets the eye, you could say.
Becca, what about you?
I really like it. It was fun watching it after all of the intensity of Infinity War. This was just kind of like, it felt much lower stakes, and it was fun, just fun all around.
Mike?
Yeah, I think I definitely like the first one more, but I also think this movie is fine. I think it's really entertaining. I think there's a villain problem. I think there's like two half villains that don't really add up to a full villain to me, and I think the movie is like missing something in that area. But other than that, it's pretty good. It's really funny. It's got some cameo appearances that I really enjoy, and I think the action scene at the end goes on a little too long. But other than that, I think it's a fun film.
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything you guys said. I think this one actually has gotten, not that it's gotten better for me, but I enjoy it more now as opposed to when I first saw it in the theater, because coming out in between Infinity War and Endgame, you're coming off of Infinity War and you're just ready to get back into that story. And it's kind of just like, all right, this is fun, but I want to get back to the main storyline here. But now, having seen everything and watching it again, it's very enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. I would say it's one of the most fun movies. It's very funny. Obviously, Paul Rudd's hilarious, and just a great cast around him. But yeah, I would say it's one of the most fun movies the MCU has to offer. I do want to talk a little bit about the quantum realm. This movie has a lot of sort of flimsy science, I guess, that it's based around. Not that any of these movies don't really, but the quantum realm is visually fantastic, but to me, just kind of very loosey-goosey, kind of just whatever the plot needs, that's what it does for them. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think like you, I'm confused as to how the quantum realm actually works. But yeah, it's just one of those things where, like you said, it's like it just behaves the way the plot needs it to.
Right.
So I think you're right.
Well, that's true of the whole Pym particles and the suit and all that too. Basically, like, oh, it makes you have the strength of this, but you are small. And then they're like, yeah, but you can shrink buildings and carry it around like a suitcase. It doesn't matter. But you just go with it, and they kind of make fun of that too. Be like, do you guys just throw quantum into all sorts of in front of whatever?
Yeah, I thought that's a great line where they kind of like you said, they just poke fun at themselves there. Just throw quantum in front of everything. Becca, what about you? Do you have anything else about the quantum realm?
Not really. I mean, that they're able to, like, that Janet was able to realize that that Scott had been in there before. Like, the fact that she could put the antenna in his head. I mean, how does any of that work? You just have to be like, okay, yeah, that's what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the fact that she was, I guess, in there for 30 years, but Scott was in there for 5 years, and for him it was 5 hours. So I'm curious to know, like, how long was it for her that she was actually in there?
And like, she aged like you would assume 30 years,
right?
But but Scott didn't age at all. Maybe that's just a Paul Rudd like miracle.
Well, that's Paul Rudd.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul Rudd looking the same as he did when he was in Friends and anything else he was in back then. So, so this movie had a lot of other great comic book characters. Jimmy Woo being one of them. He was fantastic. Randall Park was hilarious in this movie. So much great back and forth between him and Paul Rudd. There were a lot of other ones though. Bill Foster, Simon Birch was one of them as well, or Sonny Birch, sorry. And then Elias Starr.
The little short kid kills his friend's mom with a baseball.
Is that what happens in Simon Birch?
By accident, yeah. He goes, "Wasabi, wasabi." See it.
So yeah, lots of other great comic book characters. One very subtle one was Elias Starr, the Ava / Ghost's father, who's actually a villain known as Egghead, believe it or not. So yeah, that was an interesting character to choose to give a nod to. I wanted to touch on how the movie opens up, giving us this flashback to seeing Hank Pym and Jan Van Dyne as the original Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I really enjoyed. Because, to be honest, as a huge Marvel Comics nerd, I was a little bit disappointed when I found out the first Ant-Man movie was going to be focused on Scott Lang as opposed to Hank Pym. And so it was nice to get back and see those characters in action. And we saw them a little bit in the first movie as well, but I like that we got to see more of them in this one.
Benji asked if we would want to see an entire movie of the classic Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I personally, I prefer when the movies in the MCU are progressing the story as opposed to going back. Like, for example, how Black Widow is going to be going back. But I think they do a good enough job connecting to other things that, sort of leave the thread for the future. So I would love to go back and see, a Hank Pym, Jan Van Dyne movie. I'm not sure exactly how they would cast that and how that would work, but
the entire thing would be their weird CGI de-aged faces.
Yeah, we just have a whole Grand Moff Tarkin on our hands for a whole movie.
Or you could just have it take place like now, but instead of it being so like action focused. I don't know. They could be like in like the superheroes in Incredibles doing work, without letting anybody else know they're actually still doing stuff, but it's a little bit less intense.
Or just use the quantum realm to explain the whole situation, right? That seems to be the formula.
Yeah.
Mike, you touched on the villains in this movie a little bit. I wanted to talk about them as well. Ghost, obviously very different from the comics in this movie. But I thought she was a very interesting character, but I agree with what you said, Mike. Not really a villain, at least not with Bill Foster sort of not pulling the strings, but kind of calling some shots, behind the scenes, I guess, for them. What about Kyle and Becca? Do you have any thoughts on the villains, I guess, in this movie?
I think Phase 3, well, I personally really liked the Phase 3 villains, but then, yeah, Ghost doesn't quite live up to the others. I think she's an interesting character, but, well, and I believe, is Ghost female in the comics?
No, Ghost is male in the comics, so they did change the character.
So I liked her. I thought she was interesting, but didn't pose much of a threat.
I do kind of like there's multiple things working against them that they aren't aware of. Like I love not just because Luis is in it, but because like how you have that set of guys that you are thinking are the obstacle, and then Ghost kind of pops out, and then you're like, oh, there's more. Everyone kind of realizes that there's more to this than they think.
Is the Walton Goggins character in the comics?
He is, yes. He is essentially what he's just sort of like a gangster crime boss kind of guy. He's the sort of guy that gets knocked out by Spider-Man on the first page of a comic before he moves on to the real story. like I said before, Ghost a little bit different from the comics. Bill Foster is very different as well. Bill Foster was in the comics was actually a big hero, emphasis on big, I guess, known as Goliath, and plays a huge role actually in the Civil War storyline. His death is a big pivotal moment in that story arc. Spoiler alert for a comic that came out in 2005. But yeah, so I really like they brought that character in. I would like to see more of him and Ghost moving forward in the MCU. I'm not sure how they would go about doing it. I don't know if you guys have any ideas, like in a way you would like to see them, but I think that would be cool.
Well, I definitely would see them popping up as supporting characters if they did an Ant-Man 3. It wouldn't surprise me if they brought back Larry Fishburne and what's the actress who played Ghost? I don't remember, but that seems like something they would
John Kamen, I think.
Yes, I believe you're correct on that one. I'm not sure of pronunciation, but yes, I think you're right. Another thing about before we jump off the villains, this Ant-Man, I guess, mini franchise, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't lean heavily on the villains. Because if you go back to the first Ant-Man movie, I didn't think Yellow Jacket was a very good villain either. But it's more about the heist and the adventure aspect of it in these two movies. So I guess it's really not a problem that they didn't have a great villain. Like Becca, you said, like there's some great villains in Phase 3, and this movie didn't have it. But I really don't think it hurt it too badly. Some of the other characters, obviously, Luis is one of the great characters in the MCU, and I wish one of us could do an awesome Luis impression and just recap the entire movie in about 2 minutes.
I was thinking that the bit with Luis telling the story, and you see the flashbacks of the actors like mimicking his mouth movements. I guess that's the Quicksilver of these movies, right? They just have to do that every time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a pretty good comparison, actually. One of my favorite gags in this movie too is Kurt's Baba Yaga song and his whole Baba Yaga story. Have you guys checked out the soundtrack for this movie at all?
No.
Okay, so that song, there's actually a full Baba Yaga song with just Kurt singing, no instrumental at all. Just the full Baba Yaga song. So definitely recommend checking that out because it's a lot of fun. It's a little bit creepy, but it's fun.
I actually worked on a short film with that guy randomly. I was an assistant director on it, which is stupid because I don't know what I'm doing. But all day, everyone's like recognizing. We're like, we recognize you. You must be in something because he was in Dark Knight. He's the one that's wearing the that name tag. So, yeah, it's cooler in hindsight because it was like, oh well, yeah, he was in Dark Knight at the time, but then he went on to be an Ant-Man,
right? So
that's way better.
Yeah, he's one of those distinguished actors to exist in both Marvel and DC, right?
Yeah.
Another one of my favorite characters in both of these Ant-Man movies actually is Cassie, Scott Lang's daughter. This movie especially, she won me over 100%. Like I was 100% on board with Cassie. Everything I want her to move on and play Stature in the MCU. But Mike, you actually got a chance to talk to Abby Ryder Fortson, the actress who plays Cassie. What was that like?
Yeah, when the movie came out, they offered me a phone interview with her for another website. But I remember her being adorable, as you would imagine, over the phone. But she gave like very, very brief answers. You know, when you're doing interviews, you kind of want to draw out like a couple paragraphs at least with each question. But I would ask her something, and she'd be like, "Yes." Or, I mean, like, give me like a sentence. And I remember asking her, because I looked up at the time, like, if her character exists, because I didn't read any of the Ant-Man comics. I remember when Ant-Man would join the Fantastic Four, because I was in the Fantastic Four, and he joined a couple times. But I never read the Ant-Man comics, so I didn't know if her character became anything in the Marvel comics. And I looked it up, and I found out her character's name. What's the superhero name? Stature. Okay. So I asked the actress if she would want to play stature in the MCU, and she said yes. So that's all I remember from that interview. But it was fun to get to talk to her for a few minutes. She seemed very nice, and she was very young. So
yeah, and unfortunately, she was obviously recast as the MCU jumped forward 5 years in Avengers Endgame. So I guess we won't be seeing her play Stature. But I would still love to see the character and the Young Avengers as a whole moving forward, which I will. I did want to touch on a little bit as well towards the end, I guess. One of the things that stood out in this movie for me was those action sequences. We touched a little bit earlier. The chase scene, Mike, I know you said it went a little bit too long for you, but that chase scene nearing the climax of the movie, I thought was one of the coolest MCU scenes, or really any superhero movie at all.
I think it has a lot of great memorable moments for sure. Like I really like when Scott gets like slightly bigger than that truck and he kind of uses it as like a scooter to go down the hill. That sticks out to me. But yeah, I felt it was a little repetitive in the end, that scene. But yeah, this is minor complaint.
Yeah, I liked sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead, Becca.
No, I just was gonna say I like the Hello Kitty Pez dispenser flipping through the air. That super huge. Who can say they've ever had to, dodge a Pez dispenser that's like bigger than them?
Yeah, they did a lot of funny props with like the sort of oversized and then the little things like the salt shaker in the restaurant as well. Which that fight scene too. I mean, pretty much right in the beginning of the movie, I thought it's so much fun. Like a lot of really cool action in this, and I guess it's a unique platform, right? Like you don't really get to see fight scenes shrinking and growing at will in anything else. So, really, really good job of that, I think.
I liked the choreography of the kitchen fight and just how they used like the entire kitchen and all these different elements. Like you had, the little burner going, and then they squirt the oil in there, and then it catches on fire, and you used so much of the kitchen, and it was really well done.
That would make a better Ratatouille ride than the Ratatouille ride.
At least I wasn't the one taking a dig at the Ratatouille ride this live stream.
One other little sort of long play joke, I guess, I want to jump back to, was Hope making fun of Scott for referring to Captain America as Cap. And that's such a like right off line right there, like just like a funny in the moment little gag, but comes back 100% when you watch Avengers Endgame and Hope comes out of the portal and reunites with Scott, and she says, we're on it, Cap. And, they share this look, and such a cool moment. I just really like how that, that builds from this movie up until Endgame. Let's see what else here before we get into the huge post-credit scene that leads.
Well, let's talk about the Stanley cameo.
Oh yes. Yeah. Of course.
I think it's one of the funnier ones.
Yeah. What was he he's paying for the 60s now or something like that?
Yeah, that's fun, but I'm paying for it now.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh, I have a question for you guys. So you know how James Gunn said that he shot a bunch of those Stanley cameos himself because Stan was getting really old and he couldn't travel all over and be available for all these different movie shoots. But do you know if this was one of the ones that James Gunn shot?
That I'm not sure of. No.
Okay. I was curious about that.
Yeah, I haven't seen which ones he took care of and which ones were not. So I'm not entirely sure. You would think because this was one of the later ones, but
yeah,
not certain. What else? Anybody else have anything they wanted to touch on within the movie before we?
Yeah, I want to talk about first of all, I want to say I attended an event where Kevin Feige got an award a couple years ago, and Peyton Reed, the director of Ant-Man and the Wasp, was there to introduce him, along with David Dasmalchian. How do you say his name? That guy who plays the Russian. Yeah. but after the event was over, I went up to Peyton Reed and I had to ask him what his connection was with the Tim and Eric comedy universe, because both the Ant-Man movies have connections to Tim and Eric. These are like super niche cult comedians, I guess I would say, that I'm huge fans of. I'm a huge fan of, and there's at a certain point in this movie, Paul Rudd calls his grandfather Pep Pep when he's telling a story, which is a direct reference to the Tim and Eric. Awesome show, great job. And then Tim Heidecker himself has a cameo at the end as the whale tour guide. So much so that this movie was actually, both Ant-Man movies were worked into the ongoing plot of the Tim Heidecker fake movie review series on cinema at the cinema. They're like huge plot points. They're being cast because Greg Turkington, the other host, is in the first movie as the Baskin Robbins boss when Scott's working at the Baskin Robbins. But there's this whole other level of kind of ephemera as far as like Ant-Man goes that ties in with this like alternate universe comedy universe that I really appreciate. But I had to talk to Peyton Reed about that, and he told me about how they were fans, and Paul Rudd had been on Tim and Eric Awesome Show. There's that famous clip that goes around where he's on the computer and watching himself dance. That's from Tim and Eric. But I recommend looking into that because it really makes you appreciate the Ant-Man movies even more on a totally different level. That's all I had to say about that.
Well, it's funny because before we were recording, I was talking to Mac about the community connections and that it's written by Chris McKenna, who did a bunch of community episodes, including the finale. So I thought that was cool. And then what's his face?
Walton Goggins.
Yeah,
also,
he's on a pivotal episode of the show too. So.
Well, and Randall Park appears in a cameo of sorts.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, the Russo brothers worked in a lot of community casts throughout the MCU. So a lot of comedy influencing comic book movies.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the MCU as a whole. There's so many, comedic moments, especially within Ant-Man and then Guardians of the Galaxy. I would consider those essentially comedy franchises, right? Action comedies. So, all right. So let's get to this post-credit scene. And I want you to try and think back to when you first saw this movie. What was your reaction to this post-credit scene?
I was the idiot in the theater who, when it happened, was like, like I was not expecting all three of them to just go. And so I was shocked for a minute. like I know there's more to this story, but oh my gosh. Yeah, completely caught me off guard. So
well, I remember the big question going into this movie was if they were going to deal with the snap at all, because you're coming right out of Infinity War, and this movie, you're like, well, is Ant-Man and the Wasp going to take place after Infinity War? Is it going to take place before? Obviously, you started to figure out it can't take place after because it's basically like a comedy heist movie. So it's taking place before, but are they even going to address it? And then as soon as that mid-credit sequence started, I think when I first saw it, I was like, okay, here's where they address it, and he's going in the quantum realm. You kind of were, I don't know, I feel like I was a step ahead of what was going to happen there, but a great moment, and one of the better mid-credit scenes, I would say, from the MCU.
Yeah, I think I'm with Mike. I was kind of thinking that it was going to happen then, but at the same time, I didn't really think it was going to be all three. So
right,
I guess that was more of the surprise.
Okay, now I want to ask you guys: are you satisfied with the way that was resolved in Endgame? Because it's just like the rat like crawls over the button, right, and then he just like comes back. Because this makes it seem like, oh my god, how's he going to get out of the quantum realm? And then it's just like the van is just like in a garage, right? And isn't that how it happens?
Exactly. Yeah, the van is in a garage and a rat crawls over the controls. The rat is the real hero of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
Yeah, no, I was kind of in between what you guys were saying there. I was surprised that it was all three of them. but I did kind of expect some sort of something, some layover from Infinity War. But then I was also surprised too, because like you said, that left I almost said Paul Rudd, that left Scott Lang trapped in the quantum realm. So then obviously that meant he was also not going to be a factor, at least right away. But then also, like you said, Mike, you kind of felt like you were a step ahead, started putting things together. I was like, oh, he's in the quantum realm. Time and space works differently there. There's going to be some sort of time travel element. Started piecing things together. So I thought it was really cool because it had that shock value in the moment, but then also really laid out the plan very nicely moving forward. So I agree, one of the best, and I keep saying post-credit, mid-credit scene really, because the post-credit scene was one of those, throwaway gags with the Ant-Man or the ant playing the drums.
With the people give that crap because it was, I think we saw it in the trailer, but having like the emergency tone in the background, like it actually does kind of set the tone for that, no pun intended, for that kind of the movie, kind of, oh, now that there is this danger, but it's still fun. So I actually kind of like that the real end credit scene or post credit scene.
So yeah, that wrapped up Ant-Man and the Wasp. But I want to ask you guys, what if we do eventually get an Ant-Man 3, which I guess is in the plans, but who knows at this point? What are your best guesses? What do you think? Where do we go from here?
Think you gotta do something with Cassie.
Yeah, I would agree. I would love to see something with Cassie, and like I said, the Young Avengers, which has been kind of teased throughout. Stature obviously being a big part of that team. Also, Ghost is a member of another team called the Thunderbolts, which is a team of villains kind of turned anti-hero, but also still kind of villains. I would love to see that team brought together in the MCU. A lot of the pieces are already there. Baron Zemo, Thunderbolt Ross. So, a few of the pieces in place, and they could easily add in a few extra characters. Abomination, I think, would be a great character to bring back if they ever want to even acknowledge that The Incredible Hulk was a movie. So I think that would be a very interesting angle to go with as well. Maybe not as the main plot of Ant-Man and the Wasp, but as a sort of side thing to build moving forward.
Well, who are some other Ant-Man villains that haven't shown up yet?
It's funny because Ghost is actually not really even an Ant-Man villain. Ghost is actually more primarily an Iron Man villain. So really, I guess they could go a lot of different directions with that. And honestly, Ant-Man villains, I'm kind of scratching my head on off the top of my head right now. Nobody really jumps out. Yellow Jacket is kind of the only one that comes to mind. So unless they decide to go back and bring Egghead back in some way, which I don't see happening anytime soon.
I just figured out what I want from Ant-Man 3. I want Edgar Wright to play a role.
All right.
I don't know what, but I think it'd be great.
Ant-Man's greatest villain is himself. Oh, that is actually another thing I would love to see in Ant-Man 3 is the introduction of Eric O'Grady, who is the third Ant-Man in the comics. I'd love to see, maybe a dynamic between him and Scott Lang could be a lot of fun. So it should be interesting to see where they potentially go moving forward if we do get another Ant-Man movie. In the meantime, I guess we'll just have to settle for Black Widow and whatever comes up after that.
I think Eternals is next after
Eternals.
Black Widow.
Yep. So a lot of exciting new things happening in the MCU, which, by the way, I'm so glad to actually be able to talk about the MCU here on the Movie Club instead of the mutant verse or whatever you want to call it.
So at this point, how many MCU movies besides the Sony ones are missing from? Well, obviously you can't put the Hulk because that's Universal. But how many Disney-owned MCU movies are missing from Disney Plus at this time? Logan? That's not MCU.
I think we've got them all, right? We're missing Incredible Hulk and then the two Sony ones.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. I believe everything else is on Disney Plus.
I think you're right. When you did that, the marathon before you did the 3 phase marathon, I think everything for the most part was on
But you
Disney
can find
Plus.
out.
So.
You can actually. You should mention that.
Yeah.
If I wanted to watch one of these MCU movies with commentary from Michael Mack, how could I do it?
Yeah, on laughingplace.com. We have live blogs for every MCU movie. I was crazy enough to stay up for about 2 days straight watching every MCU movie. Some of the later films, the commentary might be absolute gibberish, but it's still there. So yeah, did you guys have anything else you wanted to add on Ant-Man and the Wasp before we wrap it up?
Oh, I remember this is.
I mean, I just love the Cassie's face. I love Cassie's face at that towards the end there, where they're watching on the news all the stuff, and they know that Scott's there because he's a giant man in the water, and I can't remember that her dad or her stepdad and her mom are sitting there, and they're like shocked because they realize what it is, and the camera pans down to Cassie, and she's just got this crazy grin on her face. So fun. But go ahead.
I remember some YouTube video I saw somewhere where they had the magician Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller watching scenes of people doing magic in movies and like judging them or something. But they showed him the scenes from Ant-Man and the Wasp where Paul Rudd was doing like the close-up magic where he took the cards out of his mouth and then the switches and stuff. But he said that Penn Jillette said that Paul Rudd was likely doing those tricks himself. So I guess he's probably a pretty good magician.
That's pretty cool. Paul Rudd strikes me as a guy who would know a little bit of close-up magic.
Yeah.
So yeah, our next Laughing Place Movie Club installment will be on Monday. I almost said Thursday. I'm losing track of my days at this point. And that will be, if I'm correct, the one and only Ivan, I believe, is our next one.
Sure.
So yeah, come back and join us for another movie night next week. Thank you guys so much for talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp with me.
Thanks.
Bye everyone.
Hi.